this is Brooke Drum with Printrbot Live. We're here at Printrbot HQ, and it's Thursday, 4:31, basically on time, which is awesome. So welcome to the show. We'll post this on YouTube later. You can always see it there too. Now, I wanted to start out with, I always, when I get ready to do this little, what do we call this? I call it the show, but it's not really a show as much as a online gathering. It is a broadcast. But anyway, before the show, I always look at my week and ask myself, what have you done this week that people might be interested in? This one was top of mind. So I've got two things, and this is the first one. First thing is I've got a customer that has a bot farm that he's built with Printrbot, and they're older. So he's got, I don't even know what he has, but I think he has simple metal is what some people call it. The one made of metal. Well, like those. But anyway, so he's used to using the printer board, the old printer board. Now, when we came out with the new hardware, we switched over to a 32-bit ARM board that runs the G2 core firmware from TinyG. Very cool firmware. You can check out their wiki. Just Google TinyG G2 core. So it has some really advanced features, but it's different. If you're used to printer boards, we really I had Lane who designed the electronics of the old printer board. We're up to F6. Lane put in some M-codes that made it easy to resize the bed, and this gentleman was used to using his bot farm with the same G code or the same slice for everything. And he didn't really want to let go of control since he's using a bot farm. So he asked me, he was a little bit frustrated when he got these because it's like, the cloud and this and that. So I said, hey, well, what do you want? And he says, well, what I really want is a Simple Pro because I love the hardware. The linear rails, the flex plate here, which is pretty cool, for your prints. Be nice in a bot farm. But he wanted it to run old school printer board. And so, I knew that it did that because we made some custom cables, and when we were testing the hardware before the G2 printer board was done, we were running it with an old printer board. But I thought, what does a guy do if he's got a Simple Pro and he just wants to revert back? Now, one note is you will lose the touch screen. That'll be of no use to you whatsoever. So even though it is on, it's not going to help. It's not going to do anything. So he's going to take that off. He's going to trade in this board, and I wanted to show you how we did it. It's actually pretty easy. So just to verify, I've got a control software here. So it knows it's a printer board, and we can do all the homing, and we can run the printer just like we would an old Printrbot. But let me unplug it and show you how we did this internally. Now this is just barely held together, so this won't be an accurate representation of how long it takes you to take yours apart here because I only got a couple of screws holding it together. This was just a test rig. All right, normally there's 4 screws there, but still it would be fast. And then I'll take the bed off too. This, looks like it only has 2 as well. Normally 4. We don't often take things apart on this. There's a little bit of dead air, but that's okay with me. By the way, if you have questions specifically about this, bring it on. All right, so there's the 2 parts. I'll unplug this. It actually ships this way. Well, sort of. All right, it ships with this external. But I wanted to just show you that. I'll unplug that as well. Okay. We're pretty much free here. Now, Dave, can you zoom in on this? Let me see if I can get this out of the way a little bit. Okay. Man, I might want to just take this out. I said zoom in on this, but maybe what I mean is, please wait while I continue to take this apart. Okay, 2.5 millimeter is what I needed. Well, the first thing that I want to tell you is that we use the same power board. It's kind of nice to have a discrete electronics running your power. Now, we've got relays in there. Someday we might enable those to do some stuff remotely, but it's a completely discrete power board. So when you're running electronics, you might get some feedback. If you got a bunch of power running through your board, it can be noisy. So Alden was adamant, yeah, you really should do a separate power board. Plus, he knew he was going to have to design any revisions of the board and didn't want to have to mess with power, which is smart. All right, now you'll notice that the printer board doesn't line up with the slots. So you would want to get a SD card extension cable and like bring it out here. Those are on Amazon for like $9. The USB cable doesn't line up, so we just stuck it in there. We didn't try to like see if there's a new way to mount it in here, but it does fit the same screw pattern as the G2 printer board, which is kind of cool. Get the thermistor. Okay, so now the heat bed is free. And then we can just take this out. So the discrete power board lives down here. It has a switch. On the back, it has an AC switch. And then you've got the ability to plug in an ATX. Now we have power supplies that you can run with, I say ATX. It's like that Molex plug that you would see on an ATX, but our power supplies that we sell, we put one of those plugs on there. So that's powerful enough to run the heat bed. But it comes with, you can get it without a heat bed and just a small 5 or 6 amp laptop style power supply that has a barrel connector, and that plugs in there. So it has both plugs. But anyway, on and off. And to get that to work, to turn on and off, we actually, on this test bed, we just plugged it into the printer hub. That's why it was coming on. But the printer hub has a couple of pins. I think it goes high, or is it low? I don't remember. But there's a hack if you want to run this without the printer hub, that touchscreen there that goes to the cloud. You can jump across. I think there's a link that Dave could put. You don't have to do it now, Dave, but there's a link on what pins you jump. You just jump 2 pins, and then you can use that power board to use this. So he could have done that, but he just chose to, Gabriel just chose to let it, the printer hub to turn it on. So anyway, you can use that. So I'll disconnect that. That's getting the power. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with the ribbon cable, and we put some double-sided sticky tape here. And, a little over halfway up the cable, we break off 4 of the ribbon cable wires, and that runs the Y motor. So if you wanted to do this, you can just leave this in place. But at the other end, you're going to have to crimp on a new cable, because this ribbon cable is actually, 4 pins or 8 pins smaller than the cable that goes into the G2. So it does not have, actually it looks like 6 pins, because these 4 have been ripped off, and this is a smaller connector, and there's 2 wires on the end here that aren't even being used. But anyway, so basically we just match up the plugs on both ends, so it's kind of a mirrored cable. It has a breakout for the Y motor, but you could rip that whole thing off and just run your own Y motor cable straight from the printer board. That would be easy. So anyway, it uses this, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 24 pin ribbon cable. We have these. And I'm going to unplug the Y motor so I can show you exactly how this works. So up at the top of this, whoops, you're not going to be able to see it because it's tucked back in here real tight. But we call this the extruder board. And I know that kind of flies in the face of the old extruder board. But this is actually Extruder Breakout V1. I think there's a V2 somewhere too. Yeah, V1.2. We have a lot of these V1s. We had to jump a wire across here, so don't let that scare you. That's already installed when you get this. But what this does up here is it accepts the ribbon cable at the top, and then it has the header pins, the Molex pins, so you can plug in your fan A, your thermistor, your LED, end stop. So that middle pin is dead, by the way. What is that? Fan B, your hot end power, which is a little confusing because you got to switch to a 2-pin Molex where, let's see, on the printer board it's a 4-pin, but that's a 2-pin here. And then what else? The motor for E, the probe, and back to fan A. So anyway, this you can get from us, and this isn't a product yet, by the way. We're trying to decide if anybody's interested in this. But if you are, I would put this up for sale. I could put that ribbon cable or just give you the connector for the end. But once you plug in the other side of the ribbon cable to an identical extruder breakout board, then you've got all of your pins to send all those parts that are up there on the top of the bot. And so that's what is here. But this is basically a bunch of short little cables. So we just made up some cables so that they'll be the same on both sides. So here and here, you see it's a Molex pin on both sides. So these are only like, I don't know, less than 6 inches. So that is all you would need. It comes back into an identical extruder breakout, and then those breakouts plug into the printer board. Really simple. So you could theoretically use whatever electronics to run this that you wanted if you're okay with losing the touchscreen. So I just wanted to show you that because it was pretty cool. I did all of this. I was in here with a voltmeter and trying to figure out. We have a version of this extruder breakout board that we call the legacy board. And it puts a different plug down here on the bottom, and you can plug it right into the G2, and you can run, the G2 can run just regular motors and whatnot, and it gets rid of the ribbon cable. But this is the extruder breakout, and the pin connector's on the top, and that's all you really need. So I did all this work to find out, oh, duh, I have something sitting on the shelf that works. So I'm going to send this, I forget the customer's name, but I'm going to send this out to him. We've already put the steps per millimeter for the Z, made all the changes to the firmware through M codes. So this he'll just be able to plug in with this ribbon cable that we've got ready for him. And we prepared it for the Y motor, like I said, by ripping back that and crimping the ends, but you could use your own Y motor. So anyway, I know it's kind of like inside baseball, but it is kind of neat to see this hardware just run on the printer board, and you can do your M codes. Maybe you have a 0.4 or bigger nozzle and you don't want to mess with running this Simple Pro with the G2. Well, it's possible. If you're interested in doing something similar, maybe you have a bare bones kit, or I don't know why really you'd want to do this. Maybe you just want to use a ribbon cable with your printer, like maybe you have a rep wrap and would like a couple of these so that you could run, clean up your wiring to your extruder head. Because I really find the wiring on this is so much nicer than the wiring on the old printers with things hanging off all over the place, you know what I mean, like that. So anyway, that's that. Any questions yet, Dave? I'm going to talk about the CNC. Okay. Now, the last thing I want to show you is a teaser. So last week I mentioned, well, I did that one MDF, and I just didn't like it. So I thought I wanted to do a CNC that was really, really, really cheap. But as it always is with me, I make what I want to use. And as I used that, I thought, I don't want to use this, so I don't want to sell it. So what was it that I decided to do? Well, I know that I wanted to redesign the crawlbot. There were a couple things about the crawlbot that bugged me. It doesn't have enough Z, for my taste. It doesn't have enough travel in the Z. It had this moving piece on the side. You can look at the crawlbot in our product pages. There's still a couple more for sale. If you're just doing 4x8 routing for 4x8 plywood or MDF or something like that, the crawlbot works great. It's a little bit slower than somebody that would be used to a real big professional machine. So it's a little slow. It doesn't have enough Z. If you want to do something other than plywood, if you're just doing flat pack furniture and that type of thing, it's fine. But that bothered me. I wanted another option. I don't want to put lead screws on it, but I wanted another option besides belt. Another thing was I thought, well, we have this extension on the end that allows you to kind of move. It runs on skateboard wheels, similar to this, and it runs on the top of a table. Well, when you're cutting, you really have to pay attention when you're cutting because you'd want to either put some brushes in front of this to sweep off the area, or something could potentially get under there, and then your Z is going to mess up. So that always bothered me. There's a few things like that bother me. So I decided to take the crawlbot design and kind of do a 2.0. And what I've done is allowed the same design to be the crawlbot. So you could show this. I'm going to show you the small version of this. But this thing is extendable so that you can do pretty much any size you wanted, with 4x8 being really the largest that I'm looking to do. So here it is. So I don't know if you're too close. Can you get this whole thing? This is non-functioning yet. The design is done. We have to cut some metal parts here, put all the belts on and everything. So this is what came from that project, the crawlbot 2.0. So I don't really have a name for this desktop yet. I think crawlbot doesn't really, I was asking my wife, what should I call this? She was like, well, it's a CNC, isn't it? So maybe the CNC or, but anyway, let me line this up. So I don't have a spoiler board on here yet. And I have these wood panels. These will be done in metal. We're using 3/16 metal right now. We'll size down to whatever width or thickness that we want. Right now it'll be all aluminum. But this uses the Faztech dual. It's like a dual height, 3-inch height. I've used the single for the 1.5-inch extrusion. For it's on the crawlbot on the back. There's both dual and single. I use it in the Model 3 printer. I've used it in the Big E. So I like it. We've got these Delrin wheels that we use on the crawlbot. So we've got a lot of those Delrin wheels. We've got the spacers that match up to using this. So it you can kind of see it looks similar. Now imagine this with black aluminum shrouds here I like it to look real nice. So it'll look a little more finished when it has these caps on. But I'll tell you, I should have put a wasteboard on this to hold it. But anyway, you can see it move. It's going parallel a little bit because I don't have it squared. But so it's really nice to move. These are eccentrics on the bottom. So these bottom wheels are all controlled with eccentrics. You just have a wrench to tighten them. And it rolls real nice. And there's no slop whatsoever in there. You can just dial that out. The reason I like this is because as I was preparing the old Printrbot CNC for sale as a bare bones kit, man, I really started to look at the price of linear rails and all of the competition out there, the people that do things like this. Now, this looks probably most similar to a Shapeoko, but also Xcarve has something similar. And what they do, and I really studied them and ShopBot and looked at CNCrouterparts.com. Now, by the way, All of my competition I'm friendly with. I know these guys. I don't know the CNC router parts guy that I know of. But I like all their stuff to a certain degree. But it always is a little bit different than I would do it, and different design goals. So my design goal was to kind of bridge the gap for somebody that wants something that starts on their desk, like an Xcarve or a Shapeoko. I think Shapeoko is up to version 3. Now, those are pretty solid. Now, as you get the upgrade kits and make those bigger, you've got a lot of cost involved. So the design of this, you'll see that it's split here in the front. The design of this is, if you want to go bigger, you just buy more belts and bigger rails. Now, Shapeoko 3 has this really cool extrusion. It really grew out of MakerSlide, which is what, his name's Bart, but MakerSlide was this V-bearing, well, he used to have a bolt-on part that would just bolt on to extrusion. I think you can probably still find that. But it's been ripped off. It's been copied by other people. But anyway, so he'd roll steel V, the bearings would ride on this little V and go along here. So he was making laser cutters with that MakerSlide. It was a Kickstarter back in the day. Well, that adds cost to your extrusion. So you can look at the Shapeoko 3, and they actually have those little V's integrated into the aluminum extrusion. But now you've got proprietary extrusion, and which is fine. They're going to make some money off of selling that to you. But I like the idea of going to Amazon or going to Fastech and just buying. You could use Mitsumi because it has a channel down the middle too. I haven't tested Mitsumi, but a friend of mine did some aluminum extrusion of his own, and it does work on this aluminum extrusion. So they're all pretty similar, but all I'd have to do is move the holes to make it work on Mitsumi if that's not readily going to work off the shelf. But anyway, so I like the idea of, if you want to upgrade this, you just get longer, you can cut longer rail and bolt it all together. You don't have to go through me. There's no proprietary, there's no MakerSlide, there's no, I'm not going to tie you down to my product. It's just extrusion that you can get pretty easily. And this stuff is pretty cheap. Mitsumi, some people love it. Since I've never used it, I just bought this from the beginning and have liked it. The profile of it would be slightly different. I think Mitsumi is flat on top, which is nice. This has a slight, angle to the top and the sides. But it doesn't matter because we're just doing V bearings on it. So anyway, you could size this up to, this is right now a 16, roughly. It's about 17. But the first size that I was looking for was, something that was comparable to the competition out there. And this is a 16 by 16. This would be bigger than the base Xcarve, but about equal to the Shapeoko 3. So that's a 16 by 16 cutting area. And then, you could do intermediate sizes. I'll probably do some kits that go bigger than this. And I was even thinking like 24 by 24, 2 foot by 2 foot. Or you could go 4 foot by 4 foot, or go all the way up to Crawlbot size. Now, instead of rolling with, inline skate bearing wheels, this rolls on Delrin wheels. And it is off of the I don't know what to demonstrate, but the spoiler board would be down here. And so the sawdust could go underneath the wheels. This clears the spoiler board, so you could clean up your sawdust a lot easier and don't have to worry about it rolling on sawdust. That's not going to happen. It also moves the belts on the Crawlbot are somewhat exposed, laying on top of the 4x8 sheet. These belts are going to run right up here, and so they run alongside the rails, and they run off these two motors. So they're up and out of the way, and the teeth of the belt face down, so they're not going to gather dust in the grooves. It's going to fall out. So I think that's a little better. But one other little trick that this thing does that I've always wanted to do, I really like ShopBot. They have great products. Now they're Windows kind of centric, which turns my stomach a little bit. I don't like Windows tools. So since I've latched onto this CNC.js, a open source project that you should, if you're into CNC, you should go download. It's pretty cool. It even works with Marlin. You can run a 3D printer with a router or, like a Dremel or something on it. So it runs with Marlin firmware. It runs with TinyG right out of the box. TinyG is pretty well respected in CNC. Those other companies, I know that Shapeoko and Xcarve, they have developed their own software and firmware, and they run off Gerbil, which is really old. No offense to Gerbil. I mean, that's what Marlin was partially based off of. But TinyG is far better. It's just a lot better. So I'm targeting TinyG to run these. You get a lot of extras with TinyG. But anyway, so this could run off Gerbil. It could run off of TinyG or whatever you got. I'll probably bundle this with TinyG. But I might try Gerbil for a while with some old printer boards. Anyway, but one cool trick that ShopBot HandyBot does that I've always thought was cool is HandyBot doesn't have a spoiler board at the bottom. Okay, so imagine, well, you don't have to imagine because it's open right now. Now with, I don't have a wrench in here, but I've got this running really high, so we've got about, I don't know, at least 2.5 inches here that we could move this down. And with 4 inches of travel, so it's 4 inches of Z, you can actually get into the surface of a piece of wood that you're sitting on top of here. Or if you sized it down even smaller, it might be something that you could bolt to a wall, and you could use your router to cut out different things. Go check out HandyBot. Now that's a very mature product. I'm just spitballing right now because you haven't seen this run yet. But HandyBot is cool because you can just set it on your work, and it'll go and carve and cut the work that you're sitting on top of. So like I could cut out relief into this table or cut a hole in the top of this table because the reach of this can be adjusted to go through what you're sitting on top of, which is pretty cool. And I think I only gave it 3/4 of an inch, so it would cut through about an inch on this. And it would be, straining a little bit because then you've got, it's almost 6 inches of travel from the bottom of this plate all the way through another piece of wood. So I'm going to experiment with that. We'll see if it has any use, but at least I designed it that way so that were possible if we want to do that. Most of the time you'd be using this with a spoiler board and a piece of work clamped onto the top, and 4 inches of travel would get you, it's plenty of room. So the last thing that I wanted to tell you, I've kind of taken all my favorites and mashed them up here. So I did like the look of the Shapeoko. It's just kind of a design aesthetic that I enjoy. It's pretty simple. This is blocky, but pretty simple like that. It's not quite as clean because this is off-the-shelf extrusion, and Shapeoko is like really flat on the sides, so it's real boxy. It doesn't weigh a lot. I mean, I'm incredibly strong, but it is pretty light. There's not much to it. You can see. But it'll be a lot heavier with the spoiler board. That MDF is heavy. But I wanted to show you what I've done here. I don't have an example to show you, but so CNC router parts. They have this really cool thing where you can take I think you can run their they have some belt systems, but you can take off this NEMA 23, and this hole right here is for this piece of metal that would reside here. And this piece of metal pivots on this screw, and what it does, it's taken that CNC router parts idea. So what you do is you actually bolt rack, like rack and pinion. This center section here is flat, so you would bolt the rack onto this center section with these little clamps that we'll have to make. And it holds the rack on here. And then this piece of metal tilts up and it's spring-loaded, so it has the pinion to mesh with the rack. So you would have, instead of belts, you could get rid of the belts, get rid of this NEMA 23, get rid of these If you want something more rigid, you can run rack and pinion. Now that is true for you'd have to do it on both sides of the Y, and you can also do it on the X. By the way, we do use linear, like the Printrbot, we use linear rail on the Z. I think, well, at least Xcarve uses some kind of weird belt thing and roller, like the maker slide type of deal. But I just didn't see a way around doing it proper. And we may make this faceplate, I've even toyed around with all the way up to 1/2 inch aluminum, because you really need it to be stiff. If you've got so much torque so far down, you don't want it to be bending. So we may beef that up. But anyway, so I'm excited about, I've got the rack, I've got the pinion, and this plate here can run with either NEMA 23s or NEMA 34s. So I'm getting pretty excited about a machine like this, even at Printrbot size. It would take a lot of rack, but you can just get it on McMaster car. Again, I don't upcharge you for the rack. If you want to upgrade from belts to rack, buy it yourself. You can buy the clips from us that hold the rack on, and you can even run a NEMA 34 stepper motor. So how are you going to drive that? Well, the new Tiny G board, which I've been waiting on with bated breath, the new Tiny G board does have step and direction out. So what this means is, instead of the driver chips, the little electronics that power the stepper motors and move them, on the new Tiny G we'll have those, but it also has step, and so it can run a NEMA 23, but it also has step and direction out, which means you could use external drivers, like external Chinese drivers. They're about $30 a channel. So you would add, you know, 30, 40 bucks for the X, another 30. I think you'd have to run 2, actually, so another 60. So for $100 and some NEMA 34 motors, you would have an extremely powerful router. And seriously, you can do aluminum on our Printrbot CNC. This would be capable of it just like that. But you can go a lot faster and put a bigger, this is a little weenie Chinese spindle, but I've got mounts for the DeWalt router that I showed, and you can, with a 1/2 inch plate, you could go up all the way to a very large spindle on here. They even have water-cooled spindles. So anyway, I wanted this to be really flexible, to be able to set up however you want it, meets your needs. You could start small and work your way up, spending the money as you get it. So that's the CNC that I'll be finishing this week, or we're going to finish it tomorrow, hopefully get it running, and then start working. I've got all these upgrades too. Let me grab a couple and talk about them real quick, and then we'll be done. So one thing I like about CNC.js is, first off, this is funny. First off, they have an install that you can put on a Raspberry Pi. And so how do you control your router? Well, this is one way that some people do. You can plug in, you know, a dongle to your Raspberry Pi. And you know, on these number keypads, you probably have one of these laying around. You got direction, so you could manually move the machine with this. This happens to be wireless; it wouldn't have to be. So you could move it around with this, and I think there's even programmable. You can assign these keys. So I just like the idea of being able to move my machine manually. So that's cool. So I got that to try out. I don't even know what some of this is. Oh. I do know what this is, I think. So another thing that's really handy, is this it? No, this isn't it. Is there a round? Well, anyway, a Z-touch. So in CNC, right now with the Printrbot, you have to manually set your, to zero out your Z. You have to like do it manually and like learn a little nuance. Well, this is like, what is this, like $8 or $6 off of Amazon? And so this height, this is Delrin, and there's a little, what is that, aluminum machine part. So you can put that right on top of your, I'll demonstrate it like this. So you could put that right on top of your stock and define the perfect 0, 0, or at least the 0 for your. So what you do is you connect that, and it's basically a contact. So you can perfectly find your Z. So it's going to trigger, it's going to move down, and when it touches that sensor, it's going to go, okay, set that to 0, 0. Or at least that's where the top of your work surface is. So you can really nail, when you're cutting, you can nail where the bottom of the board is, or at least where the top of the board is. So that's a nice little feature, and you will get charged a lot more at some of these competitors' shops. Just go get the. Now the wire is kind of sucky. It's Chinese type of wire, so I'd probably want to replace that wire. But you know, this is a pretty solid little unit, and it's only a few bucks. So I definitely want to be able to do a Z height sensor. So that was another thing I have. Now I don't know why they did this, but if you don't like the idea of moving your CNC with one of these guys, maybe this is more to your liking. So literally a PS, or what is it, PlayStation 3 controller, this is wireless, you could use this to move your machine around. I don't know why, but it looked too fun to give up, and it was only like 13 bucks. So it would be kind of cool to. Now, if you've got a Printrbot size router, you know, it's to sit there with your computer and like wait for it to move. This would be cool. You could just move it around your shop. I don't know why that's cool to me, but it is. Another thing that I got to open these to see what these are, because now I'm curious. But I have one more little nice little feature. Oh, two more. They've opened this up. Tell me what that is. Anyway, one is this. I keep leaving things. How are we doing on time, Dave? Am I out? Okay. So they have the ability to run a camera. Now, you should never CNC route without being in the room, right? But it is hard to see. You get a, we make a shroud here, a printable shroud, or maybe plexiglass window to put in here. But when you're watching your crawlbot or whatever, what is it? Oh. Forget what that is. This is, oh yeah, I was going to build a spindle control. So that's one of the components to do that. But when you're watching your router cut on a crawlbot, it's really hard to, you're getting down here and you're trying to see it. And I've even had like a flashlight moving in there. But check this out. So you could set up a camera, on one side, but that's not going to do as much good as this. So they actually have these cameras that just work when you plug them into the Pi. So it's a USB on one side. That's the camera. It's a borescope. So imagine this going through, and it's a really long cable. Again, these are on Amazon. So you got this really long cable. But that's long enough to go through your E-chain. So we're going to add E-chain to this, and imagine it coming off and being mounted right here. Well, now you're right inside, alongside your cutting blade, and it looks down. So these are used for like reverse cameras in cars and things like that. But you could see your work on a screen without getting all up in the router's business. So I'm going to try to mount that right there. It's just a fun add-on. So I thought that was kind of cool. And my son's going to love playing with this. This is hilarious. I've done a lot of work on cars, and to be able to look where you can't put your head, this would have been useful so long ago. Anyway, so that's kind of a cool add-on. And these all come with CNC.js, I mean, the compatibility for this. This is the last one. I sold my Tormach, what was it, 1100, but they did Linux CNC on that. Nice machine. You should check out Tormach. But we weren't using it enough, so we got rid of it. We sold it. But the one feature I really missed when I was operating the Printrbot CNC is this shuttle jog. It's called the Contour Shuttle Express. So this plugged right into Linux CNC, and we would use these buttons for X, Y, Z, and you could switch to X and then manually move it, like micro movements, or this jog wheel, which has snaps back. So the interface, it was Linux CNC, and this made it really, really nice to operate. But imagine you could just select X and manually move it with precision. So I dig these accessories, so I'm going to try to get all of these accessories working to see how it does work with CNC.js. But these are all right on the CNC.js site under accessories, and there's links, or at least I just did searches on Amazon. But again, I don't like companies that try to make it sound like it was their good idea, and therefore they need to charge you $100 for, or $200 for something like this. This is the open source community, executing some really good ideas and fun ideas, and they deserve the credit. I'm just clicking on links, and why wouldn't you just go buy that from Amazon? Because I'll have to upcharge you for this. Now, I might offer these in the store, but not because I'm trying to gouge people, just because you may want to get it with the machine and have it all shipped at once. So anyway, excited about those add-ons. And that is my little teaser for the Printrbot CNC 2.0, maybe Crawlbot 2.0, but it is a CNC router. So I'll show you more next week, and it'll be finished, powder-coated, and running. At least that's the hope, but who knows with me, right? Any questions, Dave?
Let's see. Can you use Mach 3?
Yeah, I'll do one thing I really am going to do with this product that is a little bit painful for us, but I find no one product makes everyone happy. There's no silver bullet. There's no printer that makes everybody happy. Some are portable, some aren't. Some are small, some are big. You can't make everybody happy. So while I will have turnkey kits where I source the extrusion and I do it all myself so that it all comes to you in a box and you just put it together with instructions, including electronics and everything, even the router or the spindle, depending on what our beginner unit will include. Well, you got to do that because, I'm the type of guy that I don't want to mess with it. Sourcing a rep wrap, that was like the most painful experience back in the day, 6 years ago. Nobody knew what the best parts were. Nobody knew where to get them. You're paying shipping across, 12 different companies. You get something and it's not as good as you thought, so you try to get something else. Anyway, it's a nightmare. So I'll get all the good stuff and put it in a box and save somebody a lot of time. You don't have to source anything. But I'll probably have, I will have options where if you want to save a little money and source some things yourself, of course this is open source, so the plans will be online. But if you want to source some of the, like extrusion is the most natural thing. So you decide on what size your machine is. Just make sure you have enough belt to go along with that extrusion. You're good to go. I don't care if you get it from me. You might even save a little bit of money if you order it yourself. But then you have to cut it. Then you have to tap the ends. And I tapped these today, burned out 2 drills because I had it on the wrong setting. Anyway, but getting all this extrusion ready is a pain. You may want me to do it, but yeah, you can do it yourself. So that goes all the way to electronics too. Lots of people love Mach 3. I hate it, mainly because, well, I think they have solutions now that are USB. But when I first got into this, you had to have a computer with a parallel printer port. And I just thought, that is not good. So yes, the Mach 3 unit that somebody gave to me, I never even plugged in. I just gave it away to some kid that was wanting a CNC. So yes, this will be offered without electronics. Some people want to put really, really expensive motors on here. So maybe we'll have a unit without the NEMA 23s. It actually saves me trouble to sell it bare bones, but then it makes trouble for you. You got to source all this stuff. But yes, yes, if you wanted to run it with Mach 3, you sure could. I haven't decided on whether or not to put end stops on max and min. Not a big deal, but I might do that in case your board supports that. But I definitely will have end stops on this one. We put them on the Crawlbot, but then took them off later because we didn't use them. We would manually set the machine, and there was just no need to have them. But with this, a little easier to mount end stops on max and min. So anyway, any other questions? Yeah, definitely. You want a shop bot I said ShopBot, Shop Vac, a vacuum. You want a vacuum mount. That'll be 3D printed. I like the idea of having a plexiglass piece in there with actual brush so you can see what's going on from the front. So our CrawlBot and our Printrbot CNC had 3D printed. We published the files, but it hurt visibility. So I'm wanting to do something that you can actually see what's going on there. With the borescope, though, you wouldn't need to. Oh, one other little cool deal. So I don't know if you can see it, but if you look right down this line right here in the drawing, I made it so you can add in some extrusion on the bottom to make it more flat on the bottom here. So some extrusion can go across here. Yeah, just hit hang up or whatever. Who was it? Never mind. Anyway, the extrusion can go across here, but what that sets you up for is you could, if you have a small one, you can actually add plexiglass, and this is the top of the machine. Looks like, oh, I just set it off its rails. So this is the top of the machine. So you could enclose this in plexiglass to keep the sawdust down. Some of the designs of the other competitors I've mentioned, there's no way to put it inside a box without a whole bunch of trouble. Even ShopBot, when there's a hackerspace, I donated a CNC and a CrawlBot and a couple laser cutters. And when I went down there, they had a ShopBot there, which I always like to watch. So the guy was cutting with the ShopBot. But I have to say that the plexiglass enclosure for that was ridiculously large. I mean, it was an afterthought for sure. But in the very beginning design, I haven't drawn it all yet. I only started. But the box for this, if you have a small one, you'll be able to enclose this, which is important for schools to make sure you can just hook a shop vac to it and evacuate that air, not have sawdust go all over the shop. And frankly, you're running the Printrbot CNCs here, which is not set up for an enclosure at all, and that was one of the things I hated about it. It really gets your shop messy, man. When you're doing MDF, you want either a very good, little brush and sawdust unit. An enclosure would go one step further. So anyway, that's in the design. What else?
More, you may have covered this sort of in the past. What happened to all the other printers? Now I'm only seeing the Plus Pro, the Model 3 kit, and the Simple Pro. What happened to the old machines?
The old machines are old, and they have been upgraded. Well, let me say it this way. Older machines, they have a life of about a couple years, and then new, better ideas come along and take their place, essentially. So those models have been retired. Now, believe me, it's not without tons of, like, did I do the right thing? But I really do feel like I did. Here's why. The Play was, what did we end up selling that for at the end of its run? Not the refurb, not the get rid of them price. It's $400. $400 for the Play. There wasn't a lot of margin in that, to be honest. You can't, now the designs are out there. If you go try to make your own Play and sell them in Amazon or whatever, you will lose. You can't base a company off of selling Plays made in the USA at $400. China came in and basically made that unit obsolete in so much as the price. If I brought that unit back, because now it's imperative that we're a healthy company with good margin. If I brought that back, it would cost probably $500, $600 because I make them here in the USA. And they're compared with cheap Chinese machines. So I can't convince everybody that it's better, even though it is, when compared to an A-net kit, like a Prusa i3 knockoff A-net kit with crappy electronics and the whole nine. It's just a perception in the marketplace. So while it's superior, I'd have to charge more money, and I don't think at that price point for a 4x4x5 print volume, it was really competitive, so the Play went away. The Simple, I've replaced it with much better hardware, linear rails. Everything about the Simple Pro is better. and it's at the same price. You can get it at the same price, $600, or is it $100 more?
I think it's $699, but it's less than the old with heated bed.
Right. Well, can you get it without heated bed, though? Yeah, without heated bed, which is how the original simple metal was configured. I think it's the same price. But for $100 more, you can add, I think is it $799 or $699? $699 with the heated bed. So you had to add an upgrade to the old simple metal that exceeded that price. So trust me, it's a far better printer. It comes with a touchscreen. It's just better. So I will never bring back the old simple metal because it's frankly inferior. Now it did subscribe to a minimalistic design ethos that was so minimalistic it was laughable. It didn't have a power button, didn't have feet, like rubber feet on it. So anyway, fixed all that, and the new one is much better, so buy that one. Now the Plus just frankly didn't sell real well. It hit a nice niche, but Prusa and the i3, now he's up to Mark III. If you want something that prints that big, that's not a bad option for you. And I'm not trying to endorse the competition. I just believe that it's a great printer. And so I would need something that competes really well with that, or makes different design decisions around that price point. But his sells for, I think assembled it was around $1,000. So while I like the Plus, and for a while it was my favorite, the fact that it has that cantilevered bed that kind of reaches way back and reaches way forward, it takes up a small, it took up a small area on your desk, but everybody added like feet to it to make it more sturdy and stuff. So it was a little bit quirky in that it was also minimalistic. But so I guess I've discontinued them for different reasons. I want to, the next printer that I want to design, because the Plus Pro isn't selling awesome either. That one comes with the high temp extruder. So it has a much better heat bed. It's a dropping Z design. It's enclosed. So I built that one for certain reasons. But again, not every printer makes everybody happy. Where that one might belong in a lab at a university, they may not, they may not want a simple metal or whatever. It's funny because just this week I saw Cambridge. I don't know if it was MIT or something else, but they used the simple metal because it was so cheap and minimalistic and easily hackable to design a bio printer head, and they put it on the simple. And they're wanting to talk to me about that model, which is an older model. And then I saw also that NASA somebody was doing some work for NASA for the space station or whatever to do genetic testing and all this. I don't exactly know what it was, but I was reading a news article and boom, the Play is in there because again, it was cheap and hackable. I open sourced all the plans. So there may be a need for another printer in my lineup, but right now what I have is some big ones and the Simple Pro, and we're getting the CNC ready for market. And then very likely what I'll do is I'll put something more traditional together that probably competes squarely with like Ultimaker and Prusa. But I'll make my own design decisions. And the one thing I don't like about Lulzbot and Prusa that I do like about Ultimaker is I like printers that look nice. And it's not my cup of tea, the Prusa, because it's just so bare bones. And I don't think it's real consumer friendly in the way that it looks. My wife would never buy one of those. It needs to look nice. And Ultimaker looks very nice. But they do other things on the Ultimaker that I don't really care for. So, yep, I might do another printer this year that competes directly with that. Also, I was really kind of obsessed with large printers. So that's why the Plus Pro and the Model 3. And I had reasons to do those for the prosthetic client that I have. But really, those haven't found a real firm footing in the market. So I think we need a desktop printer from Printrbot that doesn't look like a Simple Pro. It's a little bit unconventional and off-putting to some. So I think an enclosed unit might be a good place to go. But it won't need to be 10 by 10 by 10 like the Plus. It might just be, well, maybe it will be 10 by 10 by 10. But it'll probably be enclosed, so that's where I'll go next. So a little sneak peek into my brain. And Dave knows you can never count on it either, because I noodle around a lot. But it's been a long time since I brought out a new printer that hits the the desktop market. I do love our screen, our touch screen. So a new printer, the next new printer I do will have that screen and the cloud integrated. It'll be optional, but I love it. So I think I'll continue integrating that. Any other questions? I think it's about time to go.
Any cloud updates for the Simple Pro?
For the Simple Pro.
Specifically, like
Well,
what I was this morning, just
yeah. I will tell you, I went to flash some Simple Pro screens. I say it was Jonathan. Went to flash some Simple Pro screens, and we realized that some of the libraries involved, the ESP, Wi-Fi stuff, had been updated, so it forced us to go in, fix some bugs. Philip over in Germany has made some changes to GitHub, so the firmware now has less bugs. To compile it, you're not going to see any difference really. But now we're up to speed again with that, and they are both working, Ryan and Philip are working on those modifications to the cloud that I mentioned. They entail the heat bed being controlled via the cloud. Those will be integrated into the materials section, so you can adjust the speed a little bit and the temperatures on your materials, make custom materials and stuff. And that will also have the heat bed. So that is still being worked on, and also we found some ways to make it a little faster, so they're working on that. What else? The other one that I really wanted to do is we are at the same time making the starting sequence when you have a Pro and you go to print something. Right now, it's got a little bit of code on it that does the auto leveling, the heat up and auto leveling. You want to do it in a certain order. But I don't want to lock people down to that, so we are putting that starting G-code, the auto level and all that. That is going to be configurable in the cloud optionally. It'll be loaded default. But if you wanted to, so what this allows is with the G2 board, you could put in your starting G-code that you have a plus, or that you have a Prusa, or that you have something else. And you'll be able to use what tip size, different torque on the motor, or different current on the motor, all kinds of things are configurable in TinyG. But you don't want to have to hook that up every time, so if you have the ability to control the starting G-code in the cloud, then you can really set this touchscreen and use our cloud, run a print farm from it. There'd be no more limitations to using this touchscreen and our cloud if it suits you. So we're trying to do all that at once, so that's why it's taking a while. All right, is that enough, Dave? That's enough. Well, thanks for joining us on these Thursdays. That's pretty much it, man. I'm looking forward to showing you this very soon, and you can find us on Twitter. I'm on Google Plus all the time. I'm on Twitter and Google Plus. I kind of hate Facebook, even though we're broadcasting live on Facebook right now. I hope they're not listening. But I'm not on Facebook much. But anyway, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.